the perfectly executed sales call and installation by your team. You're gaining their confidence as being the expert in the industry. Your job as a salesman is to educate the prospect on what a complete turnkey installation is. Don't start walking around the house taking pictures without first going to the door and introducing yourself. We never did an installation without walking in and having that permit in hand and taping that to the front window of the customer site before we started doing the installation. Welcome to the Standby Generator Podcast, brought to you by Power Alliance. I'm your host, Jim Swetman. Together, we will dive into the world of the standby power business, offering expert insights, industry trends, and actionable strategies to help you grow and scale your generator business. Whether you're looking to optimize your operations, increase profitability, or stay ahead of the curve, this podcast is your go-to resource. So grab a seat and let's power up your business for success. Hello, this is Jim Swetman, and thank you for joining us again for another podcast. I'm extremely excited to be talking about one of the things that I like to do when I used to own a dealership is operational excellence, specifically that has to do with the perfect sale and installation as viewed by a customer. So I'd like to go ahead and talk about what I think on the customer's view, what a perfect sale and installation would be. And I think it's important that this be shared with your sales team or even you as a business owner about what has worked for me. And again, over 6,000 sales calls and, actually 10,000 sales calls and about 6,000 installations. So I just want to share a few things here in the next few minutes that I think that the customer would be looking at is what is the perfectly executed sales call and installation by your team. Obviously, the first thing is the way that the customer is presented by your company. So that prospective customer is going to call your office. Hopefully you've got a live person that answers. Or if you do have a phone tree, that it's very clear that it goes right to the sales department. And the first thing that I think that has worked out well for me is that the inside salesperson or you having to take that call is extremely slow in the way that you deliver your information to that prospect to make sure that they truly get an understanding about what a standby generator is. And what I mean by that is this, is if that prospective customer is sitting in front of their computer, please have them open up to your website. And on your website, it should be very clear what installation looks like and what are the different costs with some of the different solutions, selected circuit or whole house transfer. That should be very clear on your website about what are the different options that are available. And also on your site, you should be giving a range with a detailed scope of work behind that about what these installations cost. So you're going to spend 15, 20 minutes on the phone with that prospect, and you're going to be running down all the different information about standby generators. And again, you got to have to feel out, maybe it's their first phone call that they've ever done. Maybe they've already done a lot of their research and they just want to go ahead and book a site survey. But you want to be very patient and feel out exactly where they are in their buying process or in looking at prospective dealers. Once you spend some time with them and pre-qualify them, you want to be able to give them a range. If they're looking for just a simple selected circuit solution and you tell them it's going to be between $8,900 and $9,500, you want to make sure that they're very clear with that, because you do not want to go in to a sales call and go in blind without them knowing what the general cost is going to be based on a specific scope of work. That should be on your website too, that you're including everything to make that job a complete install. But you want to make sure that when you're sitting in front of them the first time or you're knocking on that door, that they have a general idea what this generator is going to do, or you're going to be wasting your time. So once you go ahead and book the site survey, you can if you want. You never want to go out more than 1 week. If you can get there tomorrow or the day after to go out and see them. And if they can have both the husband and wife together, that's great. A lot of times that can happen. That's where leaving detailed information is extremely important with them. You probably have your iPad there. You want to be able to email them the information, or at minimum, leave them a folder, a paper folder with the information about your company and some examples of what a good install looks like, and then why you should go with your company. Be very specific. It's important that you be specific about why they should choose your company. One of the things is that I'm putting the salesman hat on. Being a salesman, you should know the weaknesses of your competitors in your town. You should know if they're known for bad installations. You should know that they're upselling their customers. You should already be on your competitors' websites and seeing all of the bad Google reviews that they have. You should have pictures of their bad installations in your little folder. Your job as a salesman is to educate the prospect on what a complete turnkey installation is. And I've always been a believer in this, and I've mentioned this in some of my other videos, is that you need to be more of like a project manager and have the mindset that you're going to be doing that installation. But again, let's go back to what is the perfect scenario for the customer of a fantastic installation. So once you set up the site survey, once you get to their house, do not be late. When you get to their door, have everything ready. Be on time. Don't be 2 minutes late, 3 minutes late. If you are going to be late, you call them. Be there right on time. Don't sit in their driveway for 20 minutes ahead of time and then go up there. Don't park in front of their house for 10 minutes, because then the neighbors are going to come over and wonder what you're doing sitting in front. So if you are early, go down the street, sit in a parking lot somewhere, and then pull up 1 minute, 2 minutes early to that location. Make sure, too, that you're not parking behind a car, because the husband or wife or one of the older kids may have to back out, and that will interrupt the whole flow of your sales process. So there's a whole lot of little things that you have to do. Also, do not, as soon as you get out of the car, start taking pictures of the house. Don't start walking around the house taking pictures without first going to the door and introducing yourself. Now, once you do get to the door, knock on the door, stand there with your hands to the side. Do not stand there with your hands in your pockets, because believe it or not, they may have forgotten that you set up this site survey. So you want to be standing back from the door a little bit. And when they do answer the door, introduce yourself with a smile. Always be happy that you're there. Tell them that you're Jim Swetman from XYZ Generator Company and you're here to do the site survey that you had requested. What they'll probably do is they'll probably ask you to come in, but you don't want to. You always want to start out outside. One of the reasons is you already got your shoes on and you want to be able to walk around the house and take a look and see where the gas meter is, where the electrical meter is, how you're going to be able to get your generator there, all the different stuff that's going to be in your way for your generator installation. You want to be able to look at that. So you want to start out with the customer walking around outside the house to see where some of the best locations are. During this process, you do not want to be, as a salesman, overly anxious. You want to be able to kind of look around, ask them questions. Did they have any preconceived notion of where they wanted to put the generator? A lot of times they're going to say, yes, I want it right here. You know, as a professional salesperson, that's not going to be the right place to put it. But you want to say, yes, okay, that looks like a great location, but let's continue walking around the house to make sure. During this whole process of walking around the house, you want to get to know the customer without being too obvious that you want to get to know them. You really want to stick to the details about the standby generator solution. You want to be able to also have notes in there about the conversation that you had with that customer. You also, as a salesperson, want to understand what the rules and regulations are for that specific town. The company that I used to own, we are in 153 different towns and villages, and we had a 6-page spreadsheet of all the little nuances of each town. Some towns only require generators in the rear of the structure. Some of them wanted them 5 feet from structure, which we know they don't have to be 5 feet from structure. So one of them even wanted them 10 feet away from structure. So remember, the authority having jurisdiction, which is at local town and village. So before you step into that site survey, you want to make sure that you know what the town and village rules are so you don't price the generator wrong. And when you go to pull the permit and get the execution, things don't get into a really big mess. And they will if you don't understand what's going on. So again, in the perspective of the customer, you want to be the most educated salesperson out there as far as what the codes are, what the rules are, and what the complete generator installation is going to be like. And you want to start talking about that. You want to start talking like you're doing the installation. How are you going to get the generator there? You may have one of the specialty lift carts that are available that you're going to do it. Show right there where that generator is going to go and stand right there and talk to them. Talk to them about how you're going to get the gas line there. Talk to them about some of the electrical items that you have to do. And all this is done outside. And what are you doing? You're gaining their confidence as being the expert in the industry and doing that. Once you do that, you want to go downstairs and take a look at the basement where their electrical panel is. Extremely important that you do that. When you do that, there's a whole lot of things that you have to look at from a very far distance away. You're thinking about how that installation is going to be done, and you're also starting to point out some of the difficulties that may be other than what a standard installation is, which is 30 feet of electrical and 20 feet of gas pipe. If you get outside of that norm for an installation, you want to be able to start telling the customer, because remember, you've already given them a range on the phone of what it's going to be. And if you think that you're going to be outside of that range, you want to start explaining to the customer or the prospect that there may be some things that are going to be a little bit more difficult. Some examples may be it has a steel service riser and the meter is inside the house. As you know, when you do whole house transfers, the meter now has to be relocated outside along with your transfer switch. So that is going to be a little different than just having a regular SE service cable coming down and you just got to put the transfer switch outside, and it's a pretty straightforward installation. So you want to start educating the customer on some things that may be outside of just the normal installation without being too scary when you do that and start making them roll their eyes. You also want to start making them feel comfortable on what your knowledge is and how the transfer switch is going to be installed, what kind of wiring is going to happen, and giving them an idea of the inconveniences that they're going to have during the installation day as well. Like their gas is going to be shut off. If you're doing the installation during the wintertime, you want to tell them ahead of time that, the morning before we come, you might want to preheat the house because we're going to be shutting off the gas for 68 hours. If it's a whole house transfer, even if it's a selected circuit, they're going to be out of power for several hours. You want to make sure, too, that you're looking at the sump pump, and if they are doing a whole house transfer and you're out of power for 4 or 5 hours, that sump pump doesn't back up. So you want to ask them questions like that, and you as a salesman want to be looking around at all those things, educating the prospect, and also making notes yourself on that installation of what has to happen, including if that panel has to be upgraded. Some of these old stab lock breakers, and you may even still run across some of the fused screw-in stuff. We do up here in the Northeast still have some of that stuff. But you want to talk about your professional responsibility is to tell them of some of the issues that they have with their electrical service, if there is. But again, not trying to upsell and scare the customer, but just telling them that this may be a little bit more difficult installation, and start talking to them about that. So by that time, you should have a pretty good feeling about the customer as far as how he's feeling, what his education level is, and what his comfort level is in that. And then you go upstairs and you lay out everything on the kitchen table. If you have your iPad, it doesn't really matter if the husband and wife is across from you. You really don't like to have them directly across from you because there's that wall. You like to have them sit next to you so that you can go over your iPad or your paper information, and then, set the expectation with them when you sit down while you're getting things ready about how much time they have. Sometimes people, they only have 15 minutes because maybe you've already spent a half an hour looking at everything that has to go together on the execution side, and you may only have 15 minutes to do it. So you definitely want to ask them, say, you know what, great, thank you very much for the time downstairs. I hope you have a good understanding of how we're going to execute the job. How much time do you have here? Because usually my presentation here takes about 30 minutes or so to go over all the different operational items that we're going to go over and some of the different choices that you have. So get an idea of how much time they have. And then based on that time frame, you want to go ahead and set your presentation. And you want to be as technical as possible, but you also don't want to be too technical where you're scaring them away and you feel like that you're wasting their time. So go over the different options that are available. Go over the different products that are available, whether it's a Generac or a Kohler unit or a Briggs unit. And you want to ask them, obviously Generac has got the market, so you always start out with those unless you're strictly a Kohler dealer, then you start out with that, of course. But it doesn't really matter because the sales process is the same no matter what one of the products that you're selling. So you go over all the details, you go over pricing with them, and probably the most important thing when you go over pricing is going over the detailed scope of work. What I mean by that is you want to list everything and leave that list with them, paper copy also, is you want to list, you're going to take care of everything. You're going to do the building permits. You're going to coordinate with the gas service provider to make sure that that gas meter gets upgraded. You're going to work with the electrical inspector and that payment is not required until electrical inspection is complete. And that's where you need to coordinate. The electrical inspector is there the day of the installation. You want to make sure that you're commissioning and starting the generator properly, and that's included in your scope of work. And what does that include, commissioning and starting? You want to go over the operation of the generator, the functionality of the generator, and that's part of what your install crews are going to be doing. But that's all listed in your detailed scope of work. And that's probably much more detailed than what your competitor is doing. So if your competitor is pricing you less, it's probably because they're not giving a detailed scope of work and they're doing less. They're not pulling permits. They're not coordinating with the utility. They're maybe not getting an electrical inspection. They're not running black iron pipe. They're probably running the flex pipe. They're not putting the generator on a pad. They're just putting it on stone. All those need to be clearly spelled out so that when you follow up with that prospect and he says, well, you're $1,000 more than Jim's generators, well, you want to go over the scope of work with that customer. So again, you're going to leave them paper information with pricing, even if they have to handwrite it. You're going to email them all the information, and you're going to ask what's the best time to follow up. Of course, you want to ask them, can we just go ahead and get going with the installation? In fact, I have my install schedule here, right here, and we have some time available 3 weeks from now to go ahead and get this generator installed. So one of the things I always did is I had my install schedule with me. Now, on your iPad, it's probably right there. You can get right into your install schedule, or in the old days, like I did, I had an Excel spreadsheet and I knew exactly when I was available. And you always leave 2 weeks. We always left 2 weeks to make sure that we've got the permit in place, because we never did an installation without walking in and having that permit in hand and taping that to the front window of the customer site before we started doing the installation. Hopefully right there, they'll sign up, they'll go ahead, you'll get your 25% progress payment, or whatever your procedure is for getting a progress payment. You need at least minimum. That shows that they're committed to the installation. You get them on your install schedule. Everything's great. And then you want to say, hey, can I go downstairs and take a couple of pictures now that we're moving forward with this installation? So now you want to get some pictures of the installation of the basement. You want to get a picture of the panel board, and all that's going to be shared with your operations manager and the install foreman when we go ahead and do the installation. You want to go outside and take some pictures, and then that's it. You're off. And then when you get back to the office, you want to go ahead and immediately put in that information into your systems that you have. And then after that, you want to go ahead and set up you probably already have your weekly meetings set up with your operations manager, whether it's Tuesday mornings or Thursday afternoon. And on that list of installation is going to be this one that you just did. When you go ahead and input this installation into your spreadsheet or your systems that you have, all the little details that you just talked about with that customer, verbally or written, have got to be on that installation schedule. You want to put little things like this. Again, your mindset now is that you're thinking like an installer. So if it's a very steep hill that you have to go down, if it's in a wooded area, if the basement is a complete mess, and you've got to put extra time in there to run that piping in that basement, or that electrical, or there's items in the way. It could have been the hoarder house that you were dealing with, or border hoarder house, and you've got to make some extra notes in there. This is the time that you take everything that just happened and you put those notes in the install schedule. You want to make sure that you've confirmed, again, what type of system's going in, because you may have had 4 service or maintenance or sales calls that day, and you want to make sure that you put in the right generator and to make sure that everything's going. So at your meeting that you're having in a few days with your operations manager, your weekly meetings to review all of the jobs that are coming up, you want to be able to have all those details, and you've loaded the pictures in there, and you're on your way to a fantastic installation. So let's go back to what the customer expects. So what we do, the customer knows that the install is going to be on the 28th, and you're going to get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you will be there on time. Your crews do not show up at 8:30 or 9 o'clock. So what we always did is 1 week before the installation, we call the customer and verify the date and time. And then the day before the installation, we also called the customer or emailed or texted them, whatever your systems are, whatever is the easiest way that you have found out that your process and procedures go for, and to make sure that we're all going to be there. In the meantime, you should have already met at least twice with your operations managers on this installation. You want to have already make sure that the operation manager knows that generator is in stock, the transfer switch is in stock, all the cabling that you need is in stock, all the gas, all the piping, all the fittings are all in stock, and that all that is ready to go. Because the expectation has been set with that customer. There is absolutely no reason, I can think of only 1 or 2, that you're not going to do that installation. That could be a weather event, and up here in the Northeast we have snow events. I can think of in my hand 5 installs that we haven't done, and the 6 or 8 or 10,000 installs that I was involved with that we didn't do. So you definitely want to make sure that everything's all set on that side, and that's your responsibility as a salesperson to make sure that you're following up to make sure that that execution goes properly. What we always made sure too is that sometimes on the way to the install, our vans would break down. So operationally, in the departments, you want to make sure that there is a spare install van available. And if you use a monorail transport system or you use special trailers, you want to make sure you've got that kind of depth in the bench to make sure that that installation is going to go good that day. Because like most dealers, you're backed up with your installs 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. And if you lose one day of installations, it really messes things up. So you want to have spare, and you also want to make sure that you have a spare tech available. Make sure operations is available for that because you want to be able to execute that. So the morning of the install, you as a salesperson are going to get the crew started. You've already had contact with the customer. Your operations people are ready to go. You've already met with the lead sales installer, maybe the morning of or a couple of days before. So your installer, Joe, who you like, he's your favorite installer that works for you. You're going to go over the install and talk over everything, review the file with him to make sure so there's no surprises. The morning of the install at this time now is going to be seamless because you've already done all your work ahead of time. And you're going to get there with the install crews. You're going to get there a little bit before 8 o'clock. You're going to make sure your install crews show up. You're going to be the first one to knock on the customer's door at 8 o'clock with a big smile. Hello, Mrs. Smith. How are you this morning? We're all here. Let me introduce you to the install team. And you're going to introduce you to Joe and Frank and Sam and my plumbing guy. So while you're introducing them and you're taking your lead installer around and showing your lead installer what has to happen, the other guys are offloading everything that has to happen. So they're going to start getting the generator ready to offload. They're going to start getting the electrical out of the trucks. And even your head guy, the second guy, I call him the dirt guy, maybe he's a helper that works for you. He's already got the shovels and he's already got the stone offloaded and he's already unloading the base that has to go. And that's going around the back of the house or the side of the house because everybody knows exactly where the generator is going to go. And then you spend 15 minutes with the customer, you go everything with your lead installer, and then you're off for the day. Now, your lead installer, very, very important. He's got to be very communicative with the customer on what's going on. We've already explained to the customer that morning that probably in a half hour, Mrs. Smith, we're going to be shutting off your gas. And you know what? Let's make sure that you preheated your house. Or you know it's going to be a hot day, so let's turn down your air conditioner a little bit so everything's just fine. So when we turn it off, you're not sweating. Oh, by the way, let's make sure the sump pump is backed up. And then you're going to pull out your portable generator that you brought, or your van probably has an inverter in it, and make sure that that sump pump is backed up so it doesn't flood the basement while you're doing everything. Or if there's other medical needs or anything that to happen, you've already got that set up because you made the notes in your system about all the little things that have to happen for that installation. So your lead installer and everybody's going great. And your guys that are working there, whether you have 2 guys because it's a very simple install, you have 4 or 5 guys because it's a very intense install, you want to make sure that your guys are all very professional. That means simple. There's no loud music playing. You don't play your radio at the person's house. You don't use foul language. You don't smoke on site. Even if they're going to smoke, they're not even allowed in your vans, and I hope that you're not allowing your techs to smoke in your vans. If they want to smoke, they go off site and smoke. They don't stand around the front yard and everybody have a cigarette or vape or whatever they have to do. All that's done off-site. If you do have to use a customer bathroom, you ask them. But again, that's all set up ahead of time. One of the things that we've set up here at Power Alliance is a pre-install checklist that we send the customer ahead of time. I forgot to mention that earlier. But what we do is we send this pre-install checklist, and you might have left them that when they sign the contract right there. And what that does is we give the expectation to the customer about what we want from them during the morning of the install when we get there. One is we want to make sure that their cars are already backed out of the driveway. If somebody has to get to work that morning, we want to make sure, because we want to pull up with our 3 or 4 vans and we start unloading, and then all of a sudden the customer has to back out and everybody's got to get in their vans and move their vans and redo it again. So we make sure that the customers' cars are out in the street. So when we pull in, we have full access to everything. We also want to make sure if there is some cleaning ahead of time, if they've got to move some stuff out of the panels, if there's debris in front or there's boxes in front of the electrical panel, we want to make sure that the customers already moved that stuff out of the way. If they have dogs, nasty dogs that have to be maybe put out that day, that they're leashed and everything's ready to go. So there is an expectation by the customer. And again, we send that to them ahead of time, weeks ahead of time, to make sure that everything's ready to go. I worked this up one time, and there are some of you dealers do 200 installs a year. Some of you do 2,000 installs a year. I worked it up one time. The dealership that I work with, we did about 1,000 installs a year. If you had 5 guys on the job and you spent 10 minutes moving your trucks around and moving stuff out of the way because the customer didn't do that, that turned into $100,000 that I lost each year because I wasn't doing things, or the customer wasn't doing things properly ahead of time. So it's all about planning. It's all about planning ahead of time, and you know what's coming up. So you might as well get things going smooth. And the techs love it because you're a great salesman, a great project manager, and you've already anticipated all this stuff. The customer loves because you come in there right there on time. You're there to meet them. And then when you leave the customer, and now your head guy is in charge. He, your lead installer, he's got a checklist. At the end of the day, there is a checklist that he goes over with the customer to make sure that everything works properly. He's going to go over the operational, he's going to commission and start that generator in front of the customer, and he's going to have the customer sign off on that checklist so that when you pull away, that customer is 100% happy. Then what you want to do as a salesman is the next day. You want to give them a call because everything went good. You know it did because you've already talked to your installer that afternoon, or he's already called you and said that everything went good. And you want to call that customer the next day. And then the information that your lead tech has left them is the easiness to go ahead and do a Google review, and with a link on there so they can go ahead and click on that link and go ahead and do an easy Google review to make sure that everything's done properly. That is the proper way. Execution excellence from the beginning of that first sales call that we talked about, or that when they talk to you, all the way through when you met with them at that house, all the way the morning of the installation, the meetings that you had with your operations manager. All of this is not complicated. All of this is part of your standard process and procedures. All of this is standard for your salesmen. This is standard for your installers, and everything's going to be smooth, and you're going to make a whole lot of money as a business owner. Your salesmen are going to love it because everything's laid out in place, and especially your customer is going to love it because everything has gone smooth. That is part of what we can help you with at Power Alliance. Please, if you have any questions, get a hold of me, Jim Swetman, at Power Alliance, and hopefully you'll join us as a member. But that's all that we're going to talk about as far as operational excellence. Thank you very much, and join us and call me if you have any questions. Thanks. Thank you for tuning in to the Standby Generator Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share. For more resources, tips, and to connect with other like-minded professionals, visit us at poweralliance.com or visit our social media pages. Until next time, keep powering up your business.